Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Starting a little bit late. I'm your host, Dave McHugh. Welcome to the Hoopsville Studios. Yeah, a little bit different. Our first show of the week is actually going to be our top 25 show. We're going to have our regular show up on Tuesday, and believe it or not, it has nothing to do with the weather. Though that's a good excuse, right? I had a slam of a weekend. In fact, since I did the show Thursday, I barely saw the house. We don't have to get into it. We'll go talk about it on the show on Tuesday. But Tuesday, noon Eastern, we already have a hint to any of you who are watching this show on our Hoopsville membership. Who we have on the docket tomorrow? Wesleyan and Oberlin men, Lebanon Valley, Southern Maine women. Looking forward to having conversations with them about their programs. But this is the Top 25 Double Take. If you got questions for us live at D3Hoopsville or hashtag Hoopsville or in the YouTube stream where we are streaming the show, join us. We would love to chat with you and go from there. Plenty of ways to do it, and we'll take it. That's all I got. Just not a lot of fresh ideas. I am exhausted. Hadn't even shaved yet. Men's top 25, though, was a mess. The weekend was a mess. I think 4 of my top 5 lost at least a game. I could be wrong on that, but it doesn't matter. Most of my top 25 took hits. It took a lot of rethinking, and the new top 25 looks a little bit different on the men's side. We'll talk about the women's side coming up, but Ryan Scott and Ryan Whitnable join us on the Hoopsville hotline to talk about said top 25 and give us their choices this week. I did the Ryan show inadvertently today. Ryan Scott and Ryan Whitnable also have been dealing with the weather, as have I. We have 3 very different versions of that monster storm. And to be honest, we're going to get different versions from Scott Peterson and Riley Zayas. I think Peterson didn't get hit at all. Ryan, Scott, I'll start with you. You digging out all right?
We did the bare minimum today.
Perfect.
So we're gonna be walking through some tunnels, which brings me back to, New England days growing up, where you only shovel as much as you need because it's going to be full again the next day. So that's where we're at.
You're absolutely right, man. Oh man, childhood digging tunnels and playing and sliding, and forget the shoveling. Whitnable, how'd you survive it, sir?
Yeah, did okay. For those personal side, I've been in Mexico working the last couple of weeks, so I came back from 80 degrees on Friday to -10, and then 10 inches of snow yesterday. So a bit of a shock to the system getting back up and running here in the Great Lakes, but we're doing okay and just trying to survive the cold here.
Your bones didn't explode like trees do when it gets too cold.
It's pretty close.
Well, hey, Ryan Whitnable, this is going to be tough all night. Great to have you on the show. We haven't had you in a while. Great to have you. I think you're available next week. I might double dip and grab you for next week, I think, because then I don't know if we have you the rest of the season. But great to have you. I want to get your guys' take on this top 25 because I am glad I started work much earlier than usual on it because I needed the time. Whitnable, from your perspective, first, who did you have as one? Who'd you keep or who'd you put as one? And what'd you think of the rest of the top 25 at this point?
Yeah. You mentioned the chaos, and I think last week was maybe the first week we all, as a consensus, as a poll, had Trinity unanimously as number 1. And of course, at that point, the losses start to happen towards the top. I had Emory number 1 this week. I think I explained a little bit on this on social media, but I think Trinity had earned that number 1 spot preseason, defending national champions. Some people talked about their schedule this year, but I think they had earned to stay at that spot until somebody had taken them down. We saw that happen this week, and now starting to kind of put the resumes and how teams are playing currently. I made the decision to flip-flop Emory from 2 to 1 and Trinity back down to 2. Mount Union, I think, was in my top 5 the last several weeks. They dropped several spots after losing a couple of road games at Ohio Northern and Heidelberg this past week. So they drop all the way down from I think 4 maybe to the 15 range. But we're starting to get a little bit of that separation, I think, in the group. I've got 7 or 8, 10 teams that I feel pretty good about when I'm slotting them in the poll every week. And after that, I think there's maybe 30 or 40 teams that I think you could legitimately make a case in the poll. The team that I have at 11 feels uncomfortably too high, and I think there's some teams that I feel maybe at 30 that I'm feeling uncomfortably like I'm leaving them out. So it's been tricky again this year, and I think we're just trying to figure this all out together as we do every season.
I think Matt Snyder, I think I saw a tweet. He said So 15 first place votes are to Trinity. That means the average voter, other than that, the other 10 put Trinity third or lower. So you're even throwing that off a little bit more by putting them second, which means some definitely had them outside the top three to wait that out. By the way, 2-point difference between the two of them. Pretty tight. And with Trinity still getting 15 first place votes. Ryan Scott, same question. Well, how was the breakdown from week to week?
Yeah, I kept Trinity number one, just because of the way they've been playing this year, but I debated it a lot more than I expected to, right? The Emory, I think, had a couple of shaky games really early, but then has been just lights out lately, especially Faust coming on. We knew the guards were really good, but now they're getting a lot of production inside as well, and just kind of being really well-rounded. They've got the really big weekend coming up, right? They're going out to St. Louis and Chicago to play those games this week coming up. So I figured I would wait one more and see how they do out there before I flip the vote. But like those are two, I think, really, really good teams. I was actually really surprised, as we said, that so many people dropped Trinity so far. That clearly showed that there were some doubts about that team all along. Certainly they have the ability to struggle on offense, and maybe that's what people are picking up on. But yeah, I mean, just all over the place with that many losses, everyone's going to have a chance to reevaluate everything, right? You saw Redlands jump way up because they got the big win this week, even though it was really tight, and everyone's ready for them to recover, right? For a couple of losses early that we didn't expect. And yeah, I love the jumble, right? Especially coming into February, because you're just going to continue to get big game after big game after big game, and it's going to throw it all into chaos, which I think is fun, mostly because we do get a tournament at the end to work it all out, right? These polls that we do are just a test. They're not deciding anything the way that college football was back when I was growing up. So
Ryan, come on. These mean everything, sir. Come on, keep to the theme. We got to sell this. No, you're right. I enjoy it. I stress maybe more than I need to on it, but at the same time, I don't want to be a fool, right? I don't want to have my top 25 out there and people are like, what were you doing? Well, so I'm going to take it somewhat seriously. I left Trinity number one. I reveal my whole top 25 to the Hoopsville members, so I won't give it all away, but I have held this adage for a long time. I think one of the first times I may have pulled it was with Randolph-Macon a handful of years ago. I wasn't expecting anybody to get through the season undefeated, including Trinity. I know those teams in the NESCAC at least would give them a hard time, and I just think that the parity's deep enough that there's no way a team can go through a season undefeated. Benedictine, was that the last one? They got to the title game undefeated. I feel like I'm missing one. Somebody else got to the Final Four, maybe undefeated, and lost in the semis. But my point being is that's so rare and in between that I can't vote consciously that you take a loss, you fall off my number one if I still think that loss was legit. It's Wesleyan. Those two have a rich history in the last couple of years. We'll talk to Joe Riley more about it on Tuesday's show. So I left Trinity 1, but I moved Emory up to 2, and I also didn't have the heart to put Emory 2. I just wasn't quite convinced yet. I think maybe I had to see next weekend, Ryan, to your point, a little bit of how they play out. And I have some teams that are floating way too high. Absolutely, they're floating way too high. To the undefeated conversation, I have teams floating way too high. All right, so part of this show is talking about our deep dive, our dubious, and our debatable selections. For those who are new to the show, or you're just tuning in or need a refresher, dubious pick is a team we think maybe they're a top 25 team, but maybe they're just flying too high. I've got a few we could talk about. We also have deep dive team that is maybe not getting enough attention, if at all, that maybe should get some. And these two have got some good choices coming up. And debatable is one. Just throw it out there. Listen, I got some questions. Maybe I'm voting 15th. Should I be higher? Should I be lower? What do you think about it? That kind of stuff. And so Ryan Scott, we'll start with you. We will start, as we have most of the season, with the dubious side of things. Again, team you may think is flying a little high. Your thoughts on who your pick is?
Yeah, as you talked about, the ones that end up bouncing up because everybody else is losing. The one I'm pulling out this week is number 3, Mary Washington. This is a team that I think is really good. I've had them in my top 10 since we saw them at the GLI at the beginning of the year.
Yeah.
I was on them last year with how good that freshman class was, and happy to predict that run. And I think this is a really good team, but they, I it's it would number 3 is high. Their schedule maybe is not quite as good as it looked early on in the year. Um, and I think Montclair is in the same situation with me, is that they're playing at the very peak of their abilities almost every game out, right? Neither of those teams is really having off games, right? They're playing really high, and that always makes me a little leery because we know that teams need to step up another notch when they get to the playoffs. And I when you're playing at the top of your abilities most of the year, is there another notch to go, right? And they haven't had a ton of those super big games. They played a really strong schedule. I know they out rebounded Carthage at the GLI, but I still have some questions about what they're going to do against a really big team because they don't have a lot of size. Again, I think I had them 8 maybe this week, and so 3 to 8 is not a huge deal, but man, it wasn't even me that I thought about when I saw the poll come out. I thought about Marcus Kahn going, man, he's not going to like being that far up at this point in the year.
No, he's not.
It's high for that team, but maybe with all the losses, there's not any other place to put them.
Yeah. Ryan Whitnable, your thoughts?
As Ryan mentioned, I saw them at the GLI as well. I think the world of Mary Washington this year. They're so consistent. As Ryan mentioned, I think the draw that they get in the NCAA tournament is going to mean a lot because I think matchups are going to matter. I also have some reservations about how they're going to play against a team with more size. But I've just been impressed with the chemistry that they have. They obviously had the one loss to St. Thomas back right around Christmas. I think one of those holiday tournaments. But I think I've got Mary Washington. They floated up to 5 or 6 in my poll. They're one of those teams you can count on. They're not going to throw a clunker out there any week. I think for a top 5 team at this point in the season with one loss and the schedule they've played, I think they've earned to be in that that top 5, 4, 5, 6 range for sure. Three may be a little high, but I think they're pretty close to where I think they should be at this point.
As Ryan said, there isn't a lot of competition I can lean on with them of late. The only thing I have leaned on is, okay, they're not stumbling against that competition. The solid win over Catholic by 6, a really solid win over Virginia Wesleyan down in San Antonio. I'm sorry, that was not in San Antonio. This was post San Antonio. Kind of lets me look over the loss to St. Thomas, who we all know is a very good team, and overtime wins over Rowan and Yeshiva at the start of the season. But I think I've hit my max with them, but we'll see. But no, good pick. I agree with you, Marcus Kahn. Not a fan. He doesn't want this. He doesn't want the attention. He wants to stay under the radar. It's gigs up.
I'll add one more point here.
Yeah.
I would say one quibble, and I've tried to reflect this in my poll. We did get the St. Thomas Mary Washington neutral court game in December, and I've tried to honor that by having St. Thomas 4 and Mary Washington 5. If I had one quibble in the poll, I would have wanted to see maybe more voters also take that result into account.
That's a good point. I do usually consider that kind of stuff when I'm voting. St. Thomas is sitting in 4, but I am. Oh my gosh. I just realized I do have that point. Sorry, Ryan. I thought I had a great point I was going to say, but clearly my poll says otherwise. Shows you my retention rate. Ryan, Scott, any thoughts on that one?
No, it's the same thing, right? Like I've got them right next to each other, and it's pretty easy to figure out the order when they played. So, yeah.
Yep. No, I have them in the same spot. All right, Ryan Whitnable, who's your pick for dubious?
Yeah, I struggled a little bit with this one. As I think overall we've done a pretty good job in the poll with the top 25. One team getting votes this week, and I think I struggled a little bit trying to understand: is this a team that is getting 24, 25 votes from a number of voters, or is there one voter that's got them in the 18, 19 range? And that's Rhodes, Tennessee. When I'm digging through my 20 to 25 bucket, there's a lot of teams that I'm looking at that have quality wins. Obviously, some flaws in their resume. I when I dig through Rhodes and kind of consider them for that top 25, contention. Obviously, a couple losses we can toss out. The UAB loss obviously isn't going to count. We have a loss to Chicago. They played WashU, a good schedule here. They do have the loss to Millsaps, a home loss, back to start the year. And then I think the one that really got people's attention was the win against Trinity, Texas at home, back on the 16th. No problems with Rhodes. I think that Trinity win is maybe the only quality win or a top 50, top 100 type win that you can really hang your hat on there. And when I consider them against some of the other teams that I'm looking at, some of the other WIACs, some of the North Coast teams that are kind of in that end conversation, I think there's just a little bit more weight to those resumes than Rhodes at this point.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, I mean, I watched that whole Trinity Texas game, and they got a big lead, and Trinity came back a couple of times, and they were able to hold it on. I was impressed with Rhodes and what I saw in that game. I haven't actually even been voting for Trinity Texas the last couple of weeks. Looks like maybe their leading score is not coming back this year. We don't know that for sure, but he's been out a long time, and so that changes the calculus on that. It was a game Rhodes was hitting a lot of threes. I mean, before that, I'd look at them each week, and the schedule just wasn't super strong. The really good opponents, as you mentioned, is that classic that they do with Chicago and WashU and Colorado College each year, and those were not particularly close games against Chicago and WashU. And so I just wasn't really quite up there. My estimation of them increased watching that Trinity game because it was a deep team. They played really well together. I think they've got something building there that's good. I'm just not sure they're quite there yet. And I would agree, whoever's voting for them is giving a lot of hate to that Trinity win, which maybe isn't exactly what it looks like if you're only looking at the score.
Yeah, I like Rhodes, but I don't love them. They floated outside my 20 to 25 range for a lot of reasons, but not by much. I think they're a good team, but I think they're just like a lot of other teams from 12 onward, where they have flaws and you're not sure about them, but they have gotten to this juncture in the season playing good basketball, and they still haven't taken too many horrific losses or badly timed losses or whatever the case may be. So yeah, I've got them in there, but I think it's certainly worthy a conversation. I have it all the time. But yeah, I like it. Good choice. All right. So now, sorry, I'm brain freeze. Apparently it's really cold around here. Let's go deep dive. That's where we're going. Deep dive. And Ryan Whitnable. We'll go with you. We'll let you have first crack at the deep. What are your choice on deep dive?
Yeah, I'm going to go way into the deep dive here into the Empire 8 and talk about Sage, the Gators. This is a team that's gotten my attention the last couple of weeks, and if you're looking through your computer rankings and whatnot, they're probably not going to pop. I think they might be still in the 200s, 200 plus as looking massy and whatnot. Not a great SOS. Some of that is dragged down by some of the the Albany pharmacies that are on the schedule. But they've got 2 losses to this point in the season. One of those losses is to Trinity, Connecticut. There are a lot of teams with an L to Trinity, Connecticut on the schedule. Now, admittedly, that game wasn't super competitive. They also had a loss at Kuka that was probably one they would like to get back. But they've gotten through the meat of their Empire 8 schedule. And if you talk about the 3 teams that they're probably competing with, Nazareth, SUNY Poly, Utica, they've gone 3-0 in those games. And if you look at the schedule they've got left, all of them are against teams that are below 500. They got a real chance to get through this schedule, 23-2. Do I think they're in that top 25 conversation? Obviously, I'm not voting for them. They're not getting any votes yet, but they've kind of quietly put together a pretty good year, and they've got the meat, the most difficult part of their conference schedule behind them. They've really got a chance here to make a run and win the Empire 8 this year, I think.
Scott?
Yeah, I mean, this is like the deepest dive we've ever had here, right? This is it's a record, right? And I 15-2, I try to go through every team that has a record similar to this as I'm doing my ballot because I want to look at them. And again, don't want to like rag on a team here because these are all hardworking basketball players that are winning a ton of games. They're 15-2. I'm sure they're ecstatic about this. Some of the times though, I'm looking down these schedules and you see that Cuca loss like is just one that I sort of write off automatically, especially without any sort of big win. Take a loss like that. That's not a top 25 loss, frankly. But at the same time, as you mentioned, like this is, I'm sure this is huge for them. They've beaten a lot of their conference rivals. And I would love nothing more than for them to fly through this year, come in, what would it be at that point? 26-2 and pull a first round upset and make me look silly. But yeah, just not a team that's really on my radar whatsoever, but one we might see in March.
On the radar for the show, that's for sure. I didn't consider him for the top 25, but Ryan Whitnable, when you brought it up in our emails, I went and took a peek and I went, you know what? They're having a great season. I mean, I already kind of knew that, but when I dove into it a little bit more, yeah, I mean, this Empire 8's treated them well. And they're taking advantage of the funky schedule that the Empire 8 has where they don't, they're getting to play Cuca twice and they only have to play Utica once and so on. So it's working out for them for sure. Trinity
the
loss
schedule
stands out. What do you say?
All three of those tough games, conference games, have fallen at home this year. So they've taken full advantage of the difficult part of their conference schedule has been home games. So that's certainly played to their favor.
Yeah, absolutely. And yeah, the Trinity loss is rough. But they're getting it done when they need to, right? Like so hey, it's worth at least a peek, especially when we have so many teams taking losses. You keep winning, even if no matter what conference, a team gets to know you, right? And so it's tough to get through the conference unscathed. Ryan Scott, who is your deep dive?
So I'm going with St. Joe's out of the GNAC. And you might say, which St. Joe's out of the GNAC? And I'm going to say both St. Joe's out of the GNAC. I originally was pulling up St. Joseph of Connecticut. I know I brought them up as a deep dive once before. I think this is a really good team that's played a tough schedule, and they just didn't come out on the right side of enough of those tough games, right? They've got 6 losses. Most of them are good. A couple of them are, iffy. None of them are bad. It's a really talented team. We know they've been good in recent years. They've played a lot of tough teams. I think they're pretty good. But then at the same time, right below them, also undefeated in the GNAC standings so far, is we got the St. Joe's main team, which was in the preseason top 25. They played NYU to overtime down in New York early in the year, and then lost 3 starters to injury for most of December and took a whole bunch of losses. It looks like everybody's healthy and back, and they're playing really well again. And so not a team that I think has much of a chance to get into the top 25 before the end of the year, but a team that we know could end up as like a really low seed in the tournament if they win this GNAC, and could be really, really good and really hard to beat in that first round.
We'll let you take the first crack.
Yeah, so I had both of these teams in my preseason top 25, had big, high expectations for both of them. I think the Monks are coming to the GLI next year, so obviously like the young group that they had and hope they were going to start putting things together. Obviously both had the 2025 portion of their season that they would like to forget. I think the one that kind of jumped off and brought at least St. Joe's of Connecticut back onto my radar was the win against NYU to start the year. Both of them have either of them taken a loss in 2026? I don't think so.
Yes, no.
I don't think so.
The Monks lost on the second to Stevens.
Yeah, but both of them seem to be finding their way again. I think we're heading towards a showdown. What is it? The last game of the season? I think the 21st.
Last game of the season.
Yep.
So yeah, I agree with Ryan. I think both of these teams have slipped so far off everyone's radar from the beginning of the season. They both seem to be putting it together now in 26. And one of these teams is probably going to be in the tournament, and they're going to be a really dangerous opponent for somebody.
Yeah, I mean, for St. Joseph's Maine, I can't get over the fact that they had a rough first half of the season. But if you only look at the second half, I mean
3 starters, including preseason All-American, right?
Oh, like absolutely. Absolutely. No, I get that. But if they were to have to not play with those guys, that's the team we're going to see, like foul trouble or a slight injury. They'll win debates. Hey, hats off for St. Joe, Maine. St. Joe, Connecticut. I mean, they're really controlling that conference as of right now in terms of they're 5-0. Obviously, they got to take on Albertus Magnus here coming up in about a week and a half. Oh, I know, a week from tomorrow, in fact. So we'll learn a little bit more about them, but I'm watching them. I haven't considered them for the top 25. It's getting a little crowded. I think I had St. Joe's, Maine on my preseason. I don't know if I had St. Joe's, Connecticut. I'd have to go back and double check. But the fact that there's 2 St. Joe's, by the way, in the conference is enough to make your head spin a little bit. They do technically spell them a little bit differently. Good choices. I like it. All right. Let's now go debatable. So again, this is a team that now, by the way, 2 picks there, Ryan. I applaud your tenacity. Debatable team that's just thrown out there. Not necessarily a bad thing or good thing or anything along those lines. Just kind of curious what everybody's take is. Ryan Scott, we'll go with you. Who's your debatable team this week?
Well, I had a number that I was considering, but I picked one specifically because Ryan is here to talk about the OAC, and Otterbein is the one that I picked, and maybe in tandem with Mount Union. I think we're all thrown for a loop with Mount Union losing twice this week, not really to know what to make of them. Otterbein's been popping up. They're now in the top 25. I've been considering them, looking back and forth. They're 15-2, 7-1 in conference, like obviously having some good results. Their schedule, as you would expect in a conference like that, has been pretty good. They don't have like super fantastic out of conference, but they're really solid games that they're playing. And I just am still not quite sure what to make of this team. I've only seen maybe 10 minutes of them actually in live action, so it's hard to make a guess with the eye test that way. And so I was really just curious what Ryan thinks about Otterbein and whether they really belong in the top 25, or maybe they're still a little bit out, or maybe they have to beat Mount Union this week to really prove that.
Yeah, I'll as somebody who spends, as you mentioned, a little bit of time watching the OAC, you would expect, a team that gets to this point in the season, in the OAC, especially, almost all the way through the first run of conference play, 15-2, you would expect an OAC team to be, not just top 25, but, top 15, top 10. The OAC is a little bit odd this year in the fact that I feel like it's deep 1 through 10, but you don't have the multiple elite top portion of the conference. In years past, we've talked about Marietta, John Carroll, Mount Union, all being really, top 10, top 15 teams at the same time. So the league is a little bit odd in that way, in that, I think that the league is still very good, but you don't, as I mentioned, have those elite teams. And when you, as Ryan mentioned, the non-conference portion of the schedule, there's not a lot to like on Otterbein's schedule. I mean, the win against Wittenberg has looked pretty good, but otherwise, a fairly soft schedule. They had the loss to Denison. They went to Mount Union and took a loss. So I have many questions about Otterbein myself, and that's why I've been a little bit hesitant to lift them too high. I think the Mount Union game that they have coming up, is it Saturday? I think that'll be a big test for them, that they really need to get over that hump if they're a top 20 team. But yeah, I have the same questions about Otterbein and some reservations there on them.
I bought in a little harder. Maybe I've enjoyed the OAC a little bit too much this season. I've enjoyed Muskegon. I also don't know what to make of Mount Union's week. Again, I didn't expect them to go through the conference undefeated. I don't, again, back to the theme at the start, but yeah, that stunned me. I have Otterbein a little higher. I got a mid-pack. I think they're just playing well. And again, just kind of cruising through some teams that I expected tighter results against, to be honest. So I'm kind of bringing them up. I'm kind of helping pull them up the pole a little bit, admittedly. 15-2, and your last 2 losses were around Thanksgiving, start of the season. You were within 12 against Mount Union in that first one. And obviously we got a rematch coming that I'll have it circled, but 10 over Wilmington, 16 over Muskegon, and I know Muskegon's in a little bit of a tailspin. Yeah, those are solid wins, and so I've kind of leaned on it. Maybe they float a little bit because of everybody else, but yeah, no, I appreciate Whitnable's perspective on Otterbein, and shameless plug. We'll talk to Andy Winters tomorrow. Winters has nothing to do with the fact that his last name is Winters, and I chose him after a winter storm, but I got back-to-back Cardinals, by the way, Wesleyan and then Otterbein. back-to-back Cardinals inadvertently as well. Ryan Whitnable, who you got in the deep? I put deep debatable up. Yeah, no, that's what we're talking about. Debatable. Who you got?
Yeah, I cheated a little bit, but I'm going to go for the entire WIAC. And this has really been a theme for me for a couple of weeks now, where I just don't know what to make of the WIAC this year. You look at, again, the computer rankings, and I think the WIAC is number 2 to the UAA. It's obviously pretty deep. River Falls, I think, stout are maybe having a little bit down years, but I keep asking the question because every time we rank 3 or 4 WIAC teams, all 3 of them take losses, the following week. And I've begun to wonder, is the WIAC a conference that is just elite and deep, 1 through 6, Stevens Point, Whitewater, Eau Claire, or is this a year where we maybe don't have an elite top of the WIAC and we just have, some teams that are 20 to 25, maybe 30, that are all going to be dangerous tournament teams, but maybe not national title contenders this year?
Yeah, I wanted to go through. I didn't have enough time to get through and use. I don't know. Bob has talked about it some. I've seen others put it up on Twitter. The +1 for a road win, -1 for a home loss kind of thing. I wanted to see how that looked because it really feels like it's a lot about road games, right? You mentioned River Falls not having the best year in the world, but when you go play there, they're really beating teams at home, right? And it seems like that's the case all the way across. And maybe the last 4 or 5 years since COVID, really, we've seen a couple of teams dominate through a season. But I do think if we go way back, maybe before COVID, it really was a thing that in the WIAC, if you could eke out 1 or 2 road wins, that you're going to win the league, right? And it seems like we may have fallen back to that it's just really hard to win on the road in Wisconsin. And as I've done my rankings this week, I particularly paid attention to where are the wins in conference and how many teams are winning on the road. And I've given that a lot more consideration because it's hard to separate them any other way. And it feels like, at least this year, that is one differentiation that seems to be working so far.
Jeff Gard made the statement on the show, win everything at home, being simplistic here, and go 50-50 on the road in the conference. Is the premise. And so I kind of leaned on that. I certainly appreciate that, but I'm glad Whitnable brought this up. And by the way, no logo. Turns out I don't have a WIAC logo like I thought, so we didn't throw that up. And I was tempted to put all 8 up and just cover Whitnable's face. But we didn't need to do that. So quickly, just for example, Oshkosh lost to Stout at home. And lost on the road to Stevens Point. So losing at home, kind of a hit there to the theory. Platteville's 2 losses in conference, both on the road. Oshkosh and River Falls. I'm going to come back to that in a minute. Stevens Point, interesting enough, have lost 3 out of 4, all on the road. The 1 win at home. So there's something to that. Whitewater's in 4th, lost on the road to Platteville, on the road, but at home against Stevens Point, and at home against Oshkosh. And so that has gotten me to the point of thinking, I thought the WIAC was maybe better than I expected, so I started floating some teams in, and now I'm of the opinion, like Whitnable is just going, maybe this is a really good conference, but there's no standout or, world-dominating team this year. I have 1 team now in my top 25, and I think I had 3 or 4 in the last couple of weeks. Back to the point I was making about Platteville. Yeah, it was on the loss, but they lost on the road. They lost River Falls by 18. This is a 7-11 and now 2-5 in the conference, River Falls. It's not like they lost to Whitewater on the road or maybe Lacrosse. Well, yeah, Lacrosse on the road or Eau Claire. Stout and River Falls are getting unexpected wins for teams that don't look to be as dominating as the rest. And so for me, it's like, okay, hold on. Maybe we got a lot of really good teams here, but no great teams. And so Oshkosh, I think, is good. I think they're in my top 25. I did not like the loss. They came down my top 25. And I just removed everybody else over the last 2 weeks. That's kind of my adage. And yes, might pay for this in March, right? Watch 4 of them somehow end up in Fort Wayne of the Elite 8, and we'll all be going, yeah, okay, lesson learned. But right now, I think you got to do better than hold court at home and just pray on the road. I think you got to play really well on the road, even in that conference, to be a top 25 team. So no logo for
and maybe
Whitnable.
we'll see them separate themselves here as we get through the second half, right? So
right now we flip, right? We're officially halfway through, I believe.
Yep.
Yeah, we're officially halfway through. So now we return it. For example, Platteville will be at Stevens Point, then home against Oshkosh, at La Crosse and Whitewater. So after playing a bunch at home, they're about to go through a nasty road stretch themselves before finishing 2 out of 3. So yeah, we're going to learn a lot about this conference coming up here real soon. Any final thoughts on the top 25 in general, gentlemen? Scott, we'll start with you. I'm just going with the last name here.
Yeah, I mean, like I said before, I love the kind of chaotic part of this. It's fun to kind of mix and match, and I love going back and starting from scratch every single week. This is the first year I've done it literally every single week because the context changes so much, right? What we thought were a really good schedule, a month ago may not look so great right now, depending on further results. And I love moving teams up and down and seeing them move around, and the chaos is a lot of fun, and I enjoy it.
It can be. You've got nothing better to do. Ryan Whitnable, your thoughts?
Yeah, I'll just make a point to give a shout out to Montclair State, last team standing undefeated. I know we've talked about the WIAC, we've talked about the Empire 8. I think we can all agree that no matter what conference you're in, it's hard to go undefeated through any of your conference. Nobody knows you better than your conference mates, and I think that's true in every conference. So they did get a first place vote this week. I'm not sure who had them number 1, but again, just a shout out to those guys, and they're having a great year.
No, agreed. And interesting enough, we won't really see a true test for them in conference outside of just the conference knowing them. I mean teams that are playing really well, a TCNJ, a New Jersey City, even a Stockton, until the second half. They do have Rutgers Camden coming up next week along with William P., but it's New Jersey City, their third to last game, and TCNJ, their final games. And Stockton, by the way, is in that too. So their 3 out of their last 4 games will be telling. If they can get through conference play undefeated, that's stunning for any NJAC team, let alone, well, almost any conference team. So yeah, no, hats off to them. Good point, Ryan, for sure. Gentlemen, appreciate the time. You guys are awesome. Great to see you, Ryan Whitnable. Like I said, might steal you next week if you got time available. And we're going to have to do it on a Tuesday, though, so I'll email you. I'm maybe traveling back from Houston if I get to Houston in the first place, but it goes back to more winter weather. And I think Ryan Scott's got a little PTSD right now. Just a little. Guys, thanks so much. Take care of yourselves. Stay well. Stay well.
Thanks, Dave.
Thank you.
Ryan and Ryan join us on the Hoopsville hotline. Good to chat with them. Coming up here in just a moment, Scott Peterson and Riley Zayas. We got one of the 2 cameras lined up. We'll get the second one here momentarily. We'll talk to them on the women's side. There's a quick question in the live stream from a friend who's a Scranton fan, so I'll get this out of the way now while we wait for Riley to fire up his cam, as he just does. Timing's everything. Wanted to know if Lady Royals of Scranton will host in March for the tournament this year. Obviously, there's a top 25 show. We're not necessarily talking about the NCAA possibilities, but yeah, I mean, they're in a position where if they keep winning out like they are, they're going to be in a position where they host for the first 2 weekends. And their men are not in a position, I think, to be able to host at all. So they're in a very powerful position here. Now, if they stumble to the end of the season, it's going to be a different conversation. Remember, AQs, the question also was, top 64 get in the tournament. No, the AQs play a role in whoever's left, their top remaining seeds. The NPI you want to be watching on that for is what number is their NPI? Because if they are top 4, then they're hosting all the way through, barring their men are so good that they're hosting the second weekend. NYU women, for example, last year. NYU men on the opening weekend last year. Remember, we flip it. So, yeah, I don't see any reason they're not in a great position to host all the way to the championship weekend. And I look forward to seeing how that plays out. But they got to keep playing strong. And so far they are. The experts on that topic are Scott Peterson and Riley Zayas. They now join us on the old Hoopsville hotline. the Talk Top 25. Gentlemen, good to see you. I think all of our guests, sans Scott Peterson, had to deal with this absolute insane winter storm that I will not talk by its name brought up by the Weather Channel because that is stupid stuff. We will not name it. But Scott Peterson, my guess is you didn't get any of this other than the frigid cold air, I will admit.
Right. I didn't have any of the ice because it's been below 15 or 10 for probably 2 weeks now. So we've had between 10 and 20 inches of powder coming down, hanging around, but rarely more than 3 inches in a day, and not that kind of sleet, freezing rain, ice that makes
Scott,
stuff
I
so
will
dangerous,
be over to the house
power
by,
outages,
by
all
this
that.
weekend. This sounds lovely to me. For the record, Scott Peterson, you will appreciate this. Yesterday was in the teens here in north of Baltimore, 15 to 18 degrees all day long. And we got about 8 to 10 inches of snow. And then it started sleeting. And the temperature did not change. There was that much warm air getting over the top that we got sleet in the teens. I have lived in Maine and Chicago, been to New York, New England, you name it. Never seen that. Wild stuff. Riley, my question to you is, how do you have power?
You know, Dave, we got lucky here. There's a lot of people obviously in Texas without power. This is not necessarily a state that is well prepared or used to this sort of weather. But, last couple of years, we've had some of this. The ice has kept, everyone pretty much off the roads the last couple of days since it started coming down on Saturday. So we've been hanging in there, and the ice is kind of melting. So it looks like everything will kind of pass us. But no, we got lucky to keep power the whole time through.
I'm impressed that you kept power. We keep power all the time, but that's for a whole different conversation. But you guys down there, it's a different story. Anybody thinks cold weather, the power lines go, we give up. I'm supposed to be in Houston this coming weekend. I know they didn't get hit well, but we don't know if all the teams will make it for the event I'm supposed to go to. And there's now another storm potentially on the horizon for this region. So we'll see. I'm a fan until it starts affecting my bank account. Gentlemen, women's top 25. The new one is out for anybody who doesn't know. 2 new teams in, Bethel and La Crosse, Shenandoah and Concordia Moorhead out. I wouldn't say the women's side was as nuclear as the men this past week, but certainly some interesting results. For example, Shenandoah taking the loss to Randolph 56-54, not exactly the loss you want to take. Ohio Wesleyan has floated up a little bit higher. The big Carroll moved up 4 spots. Seems a lot of, if you are a betting person, a lot of money's on Carroll. Platteville took a hit. They're now 14-4, fell 4 spots because they've now lost 3 of the last 4 to Oshkosh, Whitewater, and River Falls with just a win at Stevens Point. So let me get your first takes on this. Riley Zayas, your thoughts on the top 25 in general.
Yeah, Dave, I think you're right. I mean, the women's side, we had some really, really good matchups this weekend. But some of those games, like Ohio Wesleyan and Denison, turned out to be just thrillers of games where you kind of came away thinking, this is kind of where I thought both teams were at generally. Maybe you move some teams a few spots. Obviously, Smith went and lost to Tufts, which is a huge result. A huge win for Tufts there, beat Smith for the second straight season. So there were some big results on that side, but nothing that caused any huge moves, at least in my ballot. But I do think it's really interesting looking across the board. So many of these conference races are so deep right now. You bring up Concordia Moorhead and Bethel. That was a great game in the MIAC. We also had St. Benedict beating St. Mary's in the MIAC, which was another big result in that league race. There's so many league races right now, and we're seeing it in the top 25 with the way some of these leagues have 2, 3, even 4 teams right now ranked. And I believe all of them are pretty justified and pretty reasonably ranked with what they've done up to this point.
Good breakdown. Scott Peterson, your thoughts on it all?
We just keep continuing to get conflicting information that makes it really, really hard to be confident in your ballot. Illinois Wesleyan and Carroll both holding serve against the other one at home by huge margins. So they split. You got to figure out how do I use this information. Bethel over Concordia Moorhead. I opted to keep Concordia Moorhead higher. That was a tough call. Denison lost narrowly in a game that they were very competitive in. I ended up putting John Carroll ahead of Denison, if I remember correctly, even though Denison handled John Carroll um, quite handily quite recently. And it's difficult when teams kind of go back and forth, taking punches, giving punches, and you have to really go back to what are the things that I want to be voting for? Like, what's my voting philosophy? Is it just head to head most recent? Is it other things, and how do I weigh them? It's a fun season, but it's really tough to weigh everything.
Quickly, let me ask you, based on something Ryan Scott said on the men's side, and just in general, I know people are always curious about from both your points of view. Are you starting over each week? Is the first semi part of that, and then the follow up to that is how much are you still looking at, say, November and early December, Scott?
So I kind of both do start over each week and don't. Like, I have a running poll document where I have all the teams in a sorted order, in a sorted order. The order is not assorted. And so
Wait, hold
in
on.
that
That
sense,
is a definite small college conversation right there, but go ahead.
And so, I mean, technically, the order is always there that I'm adjusting based off of what happens. But the way that I vote is who do I think would win on a neutral court tomorrow? And so, if I get a big result, the delta for me is how much does it change what I thought prior about this team? And so, I'm not saying, oh, you had a bunch of big wins this week, you had a bunch of big losses, I have to flip you. It's, do I think that my opinion of the strength of these teams changed enough for me to change the order, which is admittedly subjective, but I think that that's a large part of what makes this poll fun is you have a lot of subjective opinions that get to use their own philosophy, criteria, weights, and we have a poll that's based off of that assortment of opinions and philosophies, which makes it a unique poll and I think quite a valuable one.
Agreed. Riley Zayas, your take?
Yeah, I think that's really well said by Scott. For me, I mean, I tend to be pretty close to starting over every week. I kind of tend to, as I'm going through the week, start making notes and start getting an idea of kind of where I want teams to be. I don't really usually go back to my previous week's ballot at all and see where I had teams, as much as just kind of, updating my opinions and thoughts on teams. And I try to keep a pretty good running list of my general opinions, what different teams are doing resume wise. November and December results, I think you always look at them, you want to consider them and take them into account. But at this point also, I mean, this is a sport where teams have evolved and changed a lot since we first saw them play in November. And so you don't really want to weigh a result in November. I certainly don't, like I would a result a couple of weeks ago. Because you have to account for the way these teams change, the way their opponents change, and all the aspects that come into play when you go from non-conference to conference, and there's a lot of factors. So yeah, I'm using some of those November and December results certainly, but it's weighted way more so on what's happened recently, what I've seen from teams recently, and kind of how my eye test on them has evolved, I guess, over the course of this season. A lot of these teams have had my ballot since the beginning, but there's also been some that we've been watching for a while and have finally gotten in there. And a lot of it comes from just the way they've been playing recently and what I've seen from them, in the last probably 2 to 4 weeks is generally what I look at from that standpoint of in terms of recent performances.
Good stuff, guys. Great insight. Really appreciate that. And by the way, we're just letting go of the Scott Peterson hat because we're just getting so used to the fact that he's wearing a Seattle Seahawks hat. Tip of the hat, sir. Darn good team you got there. As a Bears fan and a Ravens fan, I'll be kidding you if I said I wasn't rooting for the Seahawks to win over New England because, well, it's New England. And now that I've pissed off half of Division III, I'll move on. Scott, let's start with you. We're going to go with the dubious side of things, as we always do. We talk about the team that may be flying a little too high. Scott, who's your pick for this?
So this is a really, really bad idea, but I'm going to put Smith
you're
out
ripping
as
off
my
the Band-Aid,
dubious,
sir.
because I have been way too low on Smith every single year, and they always wildly outperform my opinion of them. And I guess I'm still not learning because I'm putting a team at, they're not even in the top 2 or 3, they're sixth, and I'm putting them up as my dubious. And the best reasons that I have here is they've played a weak strength of schedule, 129th in the division up to this point. They haven't beaten a top team yet. Their best win is over Massey number 62. Their margins of victory have actually been trending down since they got Hannah Martin back. I don't know that it exactly coincided. So, but it's still curious to get a great player back, and they're winning by less now. I did watch their game against Tufts. I'm not enough of a basketball person to try to feel out how much Smith might be getting Martin back into the swing of things or trying some other stuff. But I think they've played a lot of teams a lot closer than I expect Smith to. And Smith is always greater than the sum of their parts. And I just don't see that happening right now. They kind of look like they are the sum of their parts. And I don't know if there's another team that has outplayed the sum of their parts by a greater extent. And I just don't see it right now. They could switch tomorrow. Or I could be dead wrong about why they're beating pretty mediocre teams by 10 points instead of 30. But that's what I got on my Smith dubious pick.
Sorry.
I'm probably far from notable enough to become bulletin board material.
No, Lynn just contacted me something about
if they want it.
Thanks, Scott. Something about we got it in mind. Thanks, Scott. I don't know. Maybe she's not listening. No, I mean, losing to a pretty good Trinity squad, but not great Trinity squad, was certainly an eye opener. What I said to the committee chairs, because Kristen Hughes is the AD at Smith. And by the way, if you've not watched that, why haven't you? If you're watching this live, you've got access to that for a little bit longer before we release it to the public. What I said to her is, this may be the worst thing the new Mac or the rest of the season needs to see, is a Smith team who's now refocused. And that's what I'll be fascinated to see how they play coming out of this kind of week. Riley Zayas, who's your dubious? Oh, no, get your thoughts on his Smith pick.
Yeah. No, that's certainly a bold pick. We've been talking about how it's hard to find dubious picks. I like the creativity there. I will say too, with Smith, I actually had Smith, I dropped him to 7 this week. So, I think a similar read for me. The thing about Smith is they always seem to turn it on and figure it out and put it together at this point in the season, heading into March. And I have no doubt that that's a real possibility for this team. Again, last year they lost to Tufts as well, and they actually lost to Tufts at home. So a 3-point road loss is not the end of the world at all. I think from a standpoint of, you look at an undefeated team versus a 1-loss Smith team, and the resume, maybe not having a marquee win right now, it does drop them a little bit more, I think, in the minds of some voters. But it's going to be interesting to see what Smith does the rest of the way. I think they're going to be refocused. I think they're going to be ready to go. But at this point, again, if you just watch them objectively without knowing the past history, which is important to consider, I think you look at this team and wonder maybe how they stack up against some of the other teams in the second half of your top 10 if you're a voter. So Smith's an interesting one right now for sure.
All right, Riley, your time for the dubious. I've ticked off New England by saying I'm rooting on Seattle. Scott has ticked off New England by saying he's dubious about Smith. How shall you tick off New England, sir?
Yeah, I guess it's my turn to select Bates as my dubious.
And now New England's angry.
There we go. Yeah, what's interesting is one of these things. I've even said this. I mentioned this to Scott earlier. It's hard because it feels like in a lot of cases, Bates is one of the few teams that feels like they've floated up a little bit in the poll as the weeks have gone on. And again, I mean, they've continued to win and they don't have a bad loss, right? Their only 2 losses are to Bowdoin. One was double overtime at home. The other, Bowdoin, won fairly convincingly at home, but still a relatively tight game especially through the first 3 quarters. So not a bad resume by any means for Bates, who's 16-2. But to this point, and similar to what we were talking about with Smith, they don't have a marquee win yet that you can really point to and say, yes, they're the number 13 team in the country because of this or because of what I've seen here. it's more so, they've beaten some quality teams. They've beaten Southern Maine. They've beaten Colby twice, beat Amherst. But Amherst is their best Massey rated win to this point. And I just wonder with Bates, it's hard. I don't feel like we have a great feel for where they're at. They're clear number 2 in the NESCAC, but they're 29th in Massey. They're, kind of a little bit even further down on Scott's current season rankings model. Their efficiency's been solid, but not overly impressive. I think they got a lot of really strong pieces, but they're one of those teams that just hard to get a feel on. It feels like maybe they floated up a little bit too high without necessarily having the really strong results to back that up at this point.
Scott Peterson.
Yeah, I think I feel similar in that I don't think I've tinkered with my top 25 since I voted. But they're 18th on my ballot. And so barely lower than what the collective voter has them at. But I think your assessment is good that it's hard to know where they are. Like they could be the 12th best team in the nation. They could be the 28th. And we don't really know because the NESCAC is quite a bit down this year. And their best wins are all going to be NESCAC wins outside of Southern Maine. Their next 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 games played, some of which include wins, some of which include the games they haven't played yet, will all be NESCAC. And so it's hard to benchmark them. A lot of the NESCAC has underperformed what we thought that they would do, but that doesn't mean like most of them are still top 75, top 85 teams, and it is hard to win basically all your games against top 75, top 85 teams that are not named Bowdoin.
Not named Bowdoin. I like that. We'll just throw one more New England in there. Yeah, I think both of these teams are pretty darn good. I think in women's basketball, one of the things I find most fascinating is the teams that can really rebound. And obviously W&L proves that, right, with Mary Slicener. Bates has that capability. I will admit, when I see them struggle, it's when they're not having as good a time on the boards as they normally do. So I would argue Bates is going to live or die this season by the boards. And if, they're really good rebounding stud can keep it up. And to someone, was it Ryan Scott, whose point was they should have 2 of their tallest players out there at the same time. They have reasons they don't do it, but when it gets to the tournaments and NESCAC and NCAA, I think their future lies on the boards. Good choices, guys. All right, deep dive time. Riley, who are you deep diving on? Anybody in New England?
We're gonna actually go a little bit more towards the Great Lakes region. Take a look at Otterbein. I think they're an interesting team. I don't have Otterbein on my ballot, but with the deep dive, I always try to find a team that maybe isn't getting a whole lot of attention, but maybe should, and kind of quietly putting together a resume worthy of note. Otterbein's 13-4 right now. They've kind of climbed up into that top 40 in Massey. I think they have 2 top 50 wins as well. They beat Carnegie Mellon. They beat W&J. They're to this point where I think even they're one of those teams you can look at, and they're not going to be a top 25 team right now, but they're definitely a team to keep an eye on because I think they played some of their best teams and some of the best teams in the country, honestly, so close. They played Baldwin-Wallace within 10, played Denison within 10. They played some really, really good teams. They played Ohio Wesleyan close for the most part of that game. And so I think when you start to look at them, the only real blemish on their resume is a loss to Alma back in mid-November. Since then, they're 11-2. They've got Baldwin-Wallace coming up on Wednesday. I think they're a team to keep an eye on because, again, when you're putting up results like that pretty consistently against good teams, eventually, as time goes on, you have a chance of really flipping those in your favor. And while some of those were non-conference, they won't play them again through the OAC schedule. It's going to be interesting to see how that all unfolds for Otterbein. I just think they're a team to keep an eye on as we go along because right now, behind Baldwin-Wallace, it's kind of wide open in that league. And I think Otterbein as a team that could kind of take that charge. And who knows what they do at Baldwin-Wallace on Wednesday, but that will be a big test and a big opportunity for them to build their resume, potentially add a third top 50 win.
Something odd about the left-hand side of our panel tonight. Both picked Otterbein in the men's and women's side of things. Both deep dive picks too, I believe, if I'm not mistaken. Too. I mean, no, maybe it was dubious. This is how much my show's retaining in my head. You can tell. Scott Peterson, your thoughts on the old Cardinal?
I think they're a great deep dive. So where are they? They were no votes. That's a good find, Riley, finding a no votes that I think is so highly ranked. They're sitting at 29th on my unofficial extra grouping there. So they are right there. As Riley mentioned, that Alma loss is the blemish, but it was a really long time ago, and probably more inclined to look at the team that they are right now. They've put together a bunch of really good wins, but the test comes right now, where their next 3 games at Baldwin-Wallace, Mount Union, and Marietta are, via Massey rankings, harder than any of their last 4. And so time to make hay there, but pulling from their efficiency numbers on the road at Baldwin-Wallace puts the line at Baldwin-Wallace minus 4.1 points. So the expectation is that it's a close game, even on the road, and we'll see what Otterbein can do in that one.
I like it. I think that conference race is fascinating, Riley.
Yeah, I agree. It's going to be interesting to see the way it plays out the next few weeks.
I always see on both the men's and women's side is interesting. Scott Peterson, who's your deep diver?
So again, maybe this is a poor idea going with a Region 10 deep dive when I'm not the Region 10 person, but my deep dive is Hardin-Simmons. They are 28th. Is that what I saw? The 3rd receiving votes team. So pretty close to the top 25, getting a good handful of votes, but you can see how uncertain the voters are because the teams in 23rd, 24th, 25th are getting quite a low number of vote points for a 23rd, 24th, 25th team. But Hardin-Simmons is 14-3, so only 3 losses on the year, 3 straight road wins in their last 3, including one over Claremont Scripps. They've beaten good teams. They haven't lost to a bad one. I think their worst loss is to Texas Lutheran. Their efficiency numbers back up that they're a top 35 team at the very least. And so their strength of schedule, 97th. So they've played a strength of schedule in the top quarter of the division. And so, I think there's 4 to 7 teams with a worse strength of schedule higher than them. And so I think that they've played hard enough schedule. They've showed that they can beat good teams. They haven't really lost a bad one. And so I think that's a really solid team with how smushed I feel my teams 15 through 30 are. They could easily be, the 18th best team in the nation as opposed to the 3rd receiving votes.
I'm just going to Riley take this one. Just go for it, sir. Tee it up.
Yeah. I think that's a good pick, Scott. I like Hardin-Simmons. I've already seen him play in person once this year. I'll see him play again on Wednesday. I think that they brought back a lot from last year. Some really key pieces, obviously national freshman of the year and Jacqueline Berry. And the thing that stands out to me, just looking at Hardin-Simmons, they're 9-0 on the road in true road games this year. I love to see that. I have a younger team. When you can go on the road and win some of these games, to win at Claremont Mud Scripts, to win in some of these tougher environments, I think says a lot about the team that Kendra Whitehead has this year. And, to this point as well, I think that they have the athleticism. I think they have the scoring capability. I think they can play with pace. They have a lot of pieces. And that TLU loss came, I think, in their opener. So since that point, they've really put together some nice results. I think Hardin-Simmons right now, honestly, looks like the team to beat in the ASC. It's a 4-team race. But I think Hardin-Simmons is the team there. And quite honestly, maybe the best team out of Region 10 right now. I mean, with Linfield right in there as well. Hardin-Simmons, really, really good pick. And I agree. I think it's, we'll see where they're at when they play ETBU, kind of going down the road. That will be a big test for them. But to this point, I think they put together some really, really nice results.
They're in the football schedule at this point, where everyone's going to play on a Saturday in the darn ASC. I don't know what to make of this conference. I mean, Mary Hardin Baylor is just not the team we expected, and ETBU is about their only challenge. Don't know what that tells us. I've been staring at that conference in terms of looking for guests and looking for story angles, and I just don't know what I'm looking at. I think, yeah, I'll leave it at that. I'm just more confused than anything. Good choices, gentlemen. Appreciate it. All right, so after deep dive, we go debatable, and it's a team that you just got thoughts on or want to get opinions on. Riley, who is your debatable, sir?
Yeah, my debatable is going to be Carroll. Carroll out of the CCIW. I think this is an interesting team. I'd love to hear Scott's thoughts on them. I've certainly had my own challenges the last several weeks with figuring out where to put them in my ballot, because on one hand, they're one of those teams that really had a great non-conference schedule, won a lot of big games, beat Chicago amongst some others. I think they have all the pieces to be a team that makes a deep run in the tournament. And we saw them beat Illinois Wesleyan by 20 at home on Saturday. So you have a big recent result. At the same time, this is the same Carroll team that obviously lost to Washington Leon neutral court, and then lost by even more, by 85-52 to Illinois Wesleyan in Bloomington. So they're one of those teams. I think you can make a case for them being higher than their current rank in the poll. I think you can also make the case for them being a little bit lower. It's just one of those teams. I mean, they played some really tight CCIW games. I expected to be a little bit larger margins of victory, but again, this is conference play, and you're on the road in some of those matchups that end up being closer than anticipated. So, Scott, I'd be interested to get your thoughts on Carroll. I personally have them a little bit lower. Or maybe would have them a little bit lower. I think actually I have them 16th. So the same spot as the poll. I have Illinois Wesleyan ahead of them though. That CCIW race in the top two is really interesting right now.
Yeah, that was a tough one for me. I do have Carroll 13th. I did put them 2 spots ahead of Illinois Wesleyan. So there are 2 teams at 4 losses that really stick out to me. Chicago has lost 4 games. The average Massey rank of their losses is 6th. And Carroll also has 4 losses, and the average rank of their losses is 6.25. So I think you can get hung up on wins and losses, but I think they played elite teams and lost those games and just have a whole batch of wins. Talking about Carroll, just a whole batch of really strong wins. I know they lost by 33 in Bloomington. The way I kind of looked at that game is I think Sawyer White averages a little bit under 2 made threes a game, like 1.8 or 1.9. She made 8. Yeah. And so that upside ability always exists with a player like Sawyer White and Illinois Wesleyan, but it's not the norm. And so maybe it wouldn't have been a 33-point loss. It would have been a 17-point loss. And so I think random variation happens. It doesn't really feel like a 33-point loss indicative of what Carroll is as a team. They've got star power with Grecius, and then Wisner has been absolutely terrific lately. So I think, as I'm putting together my ballot, there's just not a lot of teams that I'm like, I would pick this team on a neutral court tomorrow when I'm putting them up against Carroll. I'm almost never looking at wins and losses, like a win-loss percentage. And so, that is definitely not dragging down Carroll for me. I want to see what is your upside ability and can you avoid the downside? And I think that they've done both this year.
In similar fashion, sorry, I turned off my mic. So they've got their Illinois Wesleyan loss back in their favor. It's interesting. Those 2 teams didn't have close games. 85-52, 68-48. That's not what I expected from supposedly the top 2 teams in that conference. They're both 8-1. W&L loss, okay, not bad, right? Whitewater loss, right. Okay, not bad, right? Oshkosh loss was 3 points on the opener, not bad. I mean, this is an interesting Carroll team, to be honest. And we talked to Lindsay Schultz about that earlier this season. They're on the second half of the schedule, and they've got Illinois Wesleyan behind them already. I think they're in a great position here to have a lot of confidence going into that CCIW tournament. The question, though, becomes, without a major challenge, will they be ready for March, right? Like, you want something to kind of get you focused, and hopefully they can find that. The only next best team that can really challenge them is North Central, who they see next. So, again, they're going to have their biggest challenges done and dusted here for the entire month of February. Scott.
But they've struggled against some other CCIW teams, and with the exception of North Park,
Elmhurst by 5.
There's not really a bad CCIW team. You know, they play two of them on the Elmhurst, Milliken on the road. They're definitely not gimmies. You got to bring your game. It's definitely different than playing a top 30 team, but they're not gimmies. And I would imagine that they're plenty to keep the team focused and sharp.
The only thing is, 9-8 Elmhurst, 9-9 Augustana, 7-10 Wheaton, 10-9 Carthage. It's not teams that are multiple, double-digit wins and all that, other than North Central. So that's the only thing I'm stacking that on. But you're right.
Augustana was one of those teams that almost knocked off Carroll when they went to their place. Now, maybe different. I mean, Carroll's played great at home. That's the other thing too. Like, Carroll's been, had their struggles on the road, but they've been great at home this season. I don't think they've lost at home, actually. So that's another part of this too. They're going to get some of those home games in the second half of CCIW play.
Yeah,
and they could be playing for a chance to stay at home too.
Yeah, they beat Ripon by 12 at home. They beat Chicago by 21. They beat Wartburg by 6 at home. Beloit by nearly 30. Let's see, what was the other one? The closest game was Elmhurst by 5. Everything else has been double digits. So yeah, no, Lindsey Schultz and that squad really love the home cooking. Scott, who's your debatable?
My debatable is Bridgewater. So they're sitting at 4th receiving votes, and kind of similar to Otterbein, the deep dive pick. Bridgewater lost to Mary Washington, and that loss just does not look good on their resume. But it was on December 16th, kind of in that period right before break, where some weird things kind of happen sometimes. And so, how much am I wanting to say, like, it's been a little bit ago. What have they done recently? They beat Christopher Newport. They were really close with Washington and Lee. They've got the 63rd strength of schedule for me. So they've played a strong schedule. That CNU win is by far their biggest win. And so, like, I'm starting to feel out the ODAC as Randolph Macon is kind of down a little bit, but Guilford pushed Washington and Lee right to the finish. Shenandoah kind of dropped that game. I think if I think Shenandoah is like team 35 and Guilford's team 45, then maybe and Macon is 60th, then what Bridgewater's doing is a little bit less impressive. But if all those teams are 5 to 10 spots higher, then you could definitely have a top 25 team on your hands right here.
Riley?
Yeah, I think Bridgewater is really interesting to watch. Obviously watching them play WNL at WNL, thought they really challenged a very good WNL team through much of that game. The Guilford win is interesting to me too. I think Guilford's been one of those teams consistently that has really pushed a lot of good teams this year. They may not have the wins to back that up. When you watch them play, Guilford's really good, and Bridgewater handled them in that game. And so I think you bring up a good point too, Scott. We've seen these results for Bridgewater from the very beginning of the year till this point. Now you have the Catholic loss in there by 20, which is another one that's kind of interesting. I don't even know if Catholic had Anna Skoblik at that point. But again, they beat CNU early on, and then we've seen them continue to put up some really solid results since. WNL, I think, is clearly a top 10 team. So to push them on the road is really solid. So Bridgewater is definitely one to keep an eye on. They're certainly on my watch list. I think they could definitely be the number 2 in the ODAC when this is all said and done, right behind WNL. And so we could see them playing for an ODAC title when we come tournament time.
Riley, to answer your question about Catholic, no, they did not. by the way, that WNL game was on the road. And so
Right.
they will play them at home coming up, penultimate game of the season, February 18th. With Randolph before that, Randolph, the head scratcher this week, right? With wild win to give everybody a question mark, beating Shenandoah. Anyway, listen, no, I think that ODAC race is fascinating. I agree. Randolph-Macon's a little bit down, which kind of surprised me this year. But there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, to my previous point, 8 teams with 10 or more wins in that conference. WNL's got a game lead on Bridgewater, Shenandoah, another game back. Guilford and Hollins, along with Randolph-Macon, further back. Hollins, who was 12-12 last year, is 13-4. Most wins by Hollins for as far back as we have on the D3Hoops.com website. I got to go deep diving. I think Emily Dunton deserves to get on this show. They are having a spectacular season. So just a shout out to them. Guys, as always, great stuff. I'll open the floor though at this point. What else are you thinking and discussing and all of that, Riley?
Yeah, I think, just really interested to see the way a lot of these conference races play out. We're kind of getting to that point where pretty soon we'll be in February and, everyone's kind of making that final push to the regular season. And we're already kind of getting a more clear picture of the NCAA tournament right now. We got some really good matchups coming up this week. Oshkosh plays at Whitewater, which will be a big test. The WIAC's top 2. There's some other ones. Cortland New Paltz, I believe, is later on in the week. So a lot of good matchups still to come and opportunities for us to kind of continue to look at these teams. But this is just a fun time of the year, right? Everyone's still, for the most part, a lot of these teams are still in it. There's a lot of bubble teams that are, kind of making that push to try to get in the mix. There's a lot of teams trying to hold on conference leads. We have just enough time where we're not quite in that final home stretch, but everyone can kind of see it right on the horizon. So I'm looking forward to seeing how everything continues to play out as we turn the calendar into February.
Good call, Scott Peterson.
I mean, I'm just watching Ripon, who I said on December 1st is going to win 20 straight. They've got the first 11 down. We got 7 in the regular season, 2 in the Midwest Conference, and at least 1 in the NCAA tournament necessary to hit that 20. So everyone, take it off.
Hey, I have remembered that comment, and I have looked at Ripon every single week to see how they're doing. For that reason alone. By the way, I think it's a good team too, just for record. And talking to Lauren, she likes her team. She likes her team a lot. Lake Forest, Illinois Wesleyan this week. Just mental note. Hey guys, appreciate the time. Scott, enjoy the cold. Riley, enjoy the ice. Hopefully it warms up eventually for all of you. And we'll look forward to catching up with both of you or one of you next week. I don't remember what we're doing, but I'm sure we'll catch up with somebody. And enjoy the games in the meantime, will you please?
Thanks, Dave. Appreciate it.
Thank you, guys. Riley Zayas and Scott Peterson joining us on the women's side of the top 25 debate. Good stuff from them. And great from both Ryan's Whitnable and Scott on the men's side. Always good to get their input on that. Again, your top 25s are out. Didn't really dive into this on the men's side. 5 teams out, 5 teams in. Wesleyan jumped in at 19, NYU in at 22, and WPI in at 23, Whitworth at 24, and F&M at 25. WashU dropped out, Platteville dropped out, Scranton dropped out, Stevens Point dropped out, and York dropped out. York, I think that they lose to Albright, was it? I think it was. Because I was trying to figure out, I moved in, I think 5 teams myself and dropped 5 teams myself. If you want to see my top 25 ballot, by the way, they did. It was Albright at home by 6. I will have that out for membership on Tuesday. I'm halfway done with it. I'll finish it tonight and have it ready to go. We talk about why I voted for Trinity still at number 1, which, by the way, Trinity has the most first place votes, 15. Pat Coleman tweeted something about that earlier today. Give me a second here. Let me double check what he wrote about the significance of that. Let's see. Emory's 9 number one votes are one more than the fewest ever for a number one team. 3 teams have been number one with 8 votes. It's just the third time that a number one team has not also gotten the most number one votes. Whitewater in week 3 of the 2014-15 season, Wittenberg in week 6 of the 05-06 season. Again, Emory with 9 first place votes in first, Trinity with 15, just 3 points behind. I said 2 earlier, 3 points behind. Emory moved from third to first. The other first place vote went to Montclair State. I have a feeling that's Jay Murray. All the love in the world to Jay. He's got this kind of computer-like system why he does the top 25, so I suspect that's Montclair. But I could be wrong, because them being undefeated, it could be any of the voters who are just like, well, they're the lone undefeated team left. Again, I'll have my top 25 out. One other little note, women's has gotten kind of a little bit more tighter in terms of how many teams are being voted for. 6, 8, 10, 12, 14, 16 teams are getting votes outside of the top 25. On the men's side, 14. So things have tightened up a little bit. Men's has been tight for several weeks. Women's has been, I think they had 40 at one point a couple weeks ago. Ooh, I'm using that high voice of mine. I apologize. But that is tightened up. But a lot of movement in that top 25 poll, especially on the men's side. Mount Union fell from 4th to 13th. Claremont Mud Scripps fell from 9th to 8th. Redlands went from 11th to 7th. That was the lone result between the two of them that had a difference. Chicago fell 4 spots from 2 to 6. Macon fell from 5 to 8. Those were the big falls. Calvin fell 3 spots. I'll give you a hint. I pulled Calvin out of my top 25. Too inconsistent for me for a team that should be so much better. Just inconsistent. Quick notes. We are on the air. If you're watching this, we're going to be on the air Tuesday at 12 p.m. Eastern. We already have on the tote board, if you're watching this show, Wesleyan, Otterbein, Leadville, and Southern Maine on the docket. That's men, women. Cardinal, Dutchman. What was it, Wolves? How do I not know Southern Maine? I know it's a wolf logo. My brain just doesn't want to remember anything else, apparently. But that's who we're talking to, including at least one student athlete. Yeah, just one. So looking forward to those conversations on Tuesday. And we've already got Thursday booked, believe it or not. Huskies, that's what it is. Of course, Southern Maine Huskies. Oh, my Lord. Thursday, we've already got booked, if you can believe it. So if you're tuned into this now and you're wondering, well, I wonder, it's great. You know, Tuesday's show is already in the bag, and I'm watching this now. Who do you got for Thursday? Well, on the women's side, we're hopefully going to be talking to Colorado College and Immaculata. And on the men's side, we're going to be talking to Illinois Wesleyan and Sage. Rosemary in time. Yeah, we got a good shows ahead of us this week. Noon Eastern for both. Next week, again, we'll talk more about this on Tuesday. As plans hold right now, we'll be on Tuesday again with one or both shows. I'm debating about the top 25 show. Here's the deal. I'm supposed to fly back on Monday from Houston from some training and meetings over the weekend. I'll be back in time to do the top 25 show, but I'm a little worried about the weather. If I get out there, will I get back? So the top 25 might get floated to Tuesday, but we're definitely going to have, if I don't go out of town, I may move the Tuesday show back to Monday. But as of right now, Tuesday next week as well, the following Thursday as well, et cetera, et cetera. We'll go the rest of the way and give you up to date as we enter the month of February. And with that, I want to thank Ryan Scott, Ryan Whitnable, Scott Peterson, and Riley Zayas for coming on this show. Really appreciate their take on the top 25s. You can go to d3hoops.com/top25 to see the latest polls, and we'll see you here on Tuesday. I want to thank all of you who are Hoopsville members. A reminder, for a little bit longer, you have exclusive early access to the National Committee Chairs conversation. Kristen Hughes on the women's side, Cam Fuller on the men's side. We'll release it to the general public here later in the week, but you got a little bit more time to get early access to that via video or podcast. I want to thank our friends at the WBCA and, of course, D3Hoops.com for their support of the show. We'll be on the air Tuesday at noon, Thursday at noon, right here on Hoopsville. You've been watching Hoopsville. And if you want to talk about Division III basketball, you have most certainly got to talk or listen. I'm trying to do 6 things at the same time, and it's not working so well. You've got to listen to Hoopsville is the whole point. Thanks for tuning in, everybody. Hope you enjoyed it, and we will see you for the regular shows later, and we'll see you for another Top 25 next week.